Hey everybody, welcome to Celebrate Recovery at the Common Table Online. I am a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I struggle with a daily battle with anxiety, my pride, my desire for perfection, and a pull towards depression, and my name is Zach. We're going to do things a little bit different tonight. We are going to lean on some of our friends from the CR national team. Every week they try and post a testimony or a lesson online for the wider area audience that can access through Facebook or YouTube. And in connection with my relationships with the national team, they asked that I play a testimony for you tonight. So, like I said, it'll be a bit different tonight. We're not going to have any music. We're going to skip the Serenity Prayer for tonight as well. I'm going to turn it over to our friend Robert, who is going to share a bit of his story. I want you to listen intently and see if there's anything that you can take away from his testimony. And then after he finishes, we'll regroup and I will close us out. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Robert, who will lead us through a bit of his personal story.
I am a grateful believer who has struggled with sexual integrity, anger, and unworthiness, and my name is Robert. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for joining us this evening, for giving me the opportunity to share. And I pray that this brief overview of how I got here and where I am today gives hope, and that it speaks to the heart of the person who needs to hear exactly what it is that I have to say. And I also feel that it's important for me to state that none of us get to choose how, to whom, and where we are born. All of us enter into this world as vulnerable little babies, ripe for the picking of certain generational curses and cognitive stains that are just deposited into our minds as we grow up. And these stains give birth to certain particular actions and decisions that an individual makes throughout his or her lifetime. And so this is my story. In December of 1980, at Brackenridge Hospital, I was born to a 15-year-old who had recently gotten kicked out of her own house and was taken in by her older sister. We lived on the east side of Austin in a small duplex on the Hill, as it is called. And in the 1980s, the war on drugs was peaking, and it began to infiltrate my house when my mom was only 17 years old. We'd often walk the streets everywhere, as I was told, with me on her hip in a diaper and sandals. She would often visit the Booker T projects, aka the bricks, as it was called back then, where a lot of drug activity would carry on. And due to instability, I would bounce back and forth between my mom's place of residence and my biological father's home, which was my grandmother's house. It was there that I would experience my first stint of confusion and misunderstanding. You see, oftentimes my aunt would take me into her room and molest me for as many years as I could remember, at least every single time I was over there, and I never told a single soul. And even at the young, tender age of 5, as a means to cope with the chaotic world around me, I began to act out in various ways. I was hurting, needing attention, so I forwarded my anger and frustration toward others. This was just the beginning, though. My mom had later met a man who was about 23 years older than she was. He took us in and cared for us in a way that gave the elusive appearance that things were going to be okay now. She later gave birth to my 2 younger brothers, and I felt as though she had forgotten that I existed. Much attention was given to them and my stepfather, so I turned to my friends in the streets to seek refuge and meaning. I would be their entertainment by way of bullying, fighting, stealing, vandalizing, and setting things on fire. But at least they recognized my existence. I was moved around a lot, from East Side to Dove Springs to William Cannon, then to Montopolis, and finally to Round Rock, due to all the trouble that I caused at every single school that I attended. I very seldom participated in class performances or went on field trips because I was always in ISS, or Saturday detention. But what people didn't know is that at home, it was extremely dysfunctional. I don't remember a day that went by without my stepfather being upset about something. I mean, things were decent until after my brothers were born. He would often get angry and beat my mom when she responded to him in a manner that was deemed disrespectful. And likewise, with everything I did, I got it bad as well. Ropes, extension cords, belts, and even his hands became familiar territory, as I was always in trouble. Mom's presence at home began to diminish over the years, and she fell deeper and deeper into drug addiction of various forms. And as a child, when a parent becomes absent as such, you begin to believe that you're the reason for this negligence. And looking back, I now understand that she was just trying to get away. And the only reason she came back was because my brothers and I were still there. When I was in third grade, she lost custody of us because, like many times before, she left me home to care for my younger brothers, who were 2 and 1 at the time. We ended up in a shelter for about a year before my stepdad was able to get us out. And after this, I would often visit the police station because of the mischief I was engaged in within the community. And for those of you who are from Texas and Central Texas, you know how it is in Williamson County. They don't really play around. And things got real bad when I was in 6th grade. I hung out with friends every day whose older siblings were gangbanging, so we were always fighting in and out of school. They finally suspended me for the whole 2nd semester. I then attended a school for juvenile delinquents in Jollyville, where I got jumped every single day because some of the kids that went there had beef with the dudes that I hung out with. One day, I made the decision to skip school to visit my old campus, which was a major mistake. I got arrested for trespassing because I was not allowed on the property. My aunt had to drive all the way from South Austin to pick me up as my stepfather was still at work. You could probably guess that he wasn't happy that he had to drive from Cisco and Round Rock all the way to William Cannon to pick me up after a hard day's work because of the mess I got into again. On the way home, he made sure that I sat dead center in the backseat of his Monte Carlo and proceeded to curse me out all the way to the house. And at one point in time, he even reached back and hit me across my face. But because I had become partially immune to all the abuse I received, it mostly angered me to the core. That was the moment I decided that I had enough. So the following day, I skipped school, again only to go around and steal things from elementary schools and other people's backyards. I just wanted to buy myself some time to make sure that no one was home when I went back. One of my friends had a gas can in his backyard, so I went back there and took the can. Starting with my stepfather's room, I carefully laid a trail of gas throughout the entire house. Finishing at the back door, I lit the match, took a glance around the house, dropped it, and ran out of the door. I then tossed the can in the yard of the vacant house next door, whose landscape was filled with grass taller than my knees. Later that day, the police caught and questioned me. I denied my involvement until after hours of questioning, I finally gave in. My wish of moving out came true, but not in the way that I wanted it to. I was taken to a juvenile detention center in Georgetown for 2 months before being placed in my first group home. And after almost a year of getting settled in, the state moved me to another group home in Keene, Texas, which is about 25 minutes southwest of Fort Worth. I was very angry, hurt, and confused. But because of my background, it was very hard for them to find a foster home that would actually take me. My social worker had no problem telling me that no one wanted me because they were scared of how I might act. This would add to my diminishing loss of character and a sense of who I was. 1 year later, I was blessed with a family who already had 5 foster kids and children of their own. They made sure I was medicated and had weekly visits with the therapist, monthly visits with the psychologist, and quarterly visits with the psychiatrist to make sure that the medication was working. Throughout my teenage years, I endeavored to be just like my peers. I did anything to make sure that they liked me, though most were afraid to go anywhere with me because of my short fuse and eagerness to run towards confrontation. Teachers would often tell me that I wasn't going to be worth anything. My basketball coach didn't like me much, and others started to believe it as well. Not to mention, my stepfather lost his life to AIDS, and one of my best friends committed suicide when I was in 10th grade. During my senior year in high school, I lived in 3 different homes, but I managed to graduate with a music scholarship for choir and band to attend a small school about 45 minutes south of Fort Worth. But due to parties, lots of sleeping, girls, and not attending class, I ended up with a 1.7 grade point average and ended up getting kicked out of school. I moved back to Austin for a little while and made an attempt to join the armed forces. The Air Force, Navy, and Army wouldn't take me, at the time because of my record as a juvenile and, of course, other psychological reasons as well. I did pass the test for the Marines, but had some legal issues that I needed to take care of before they would let me join. But my attitude at the time was, if it's, not simple enough, I don't want any part of it. So I moved back north. I moved in with my foster brother and his friend. He had a car that he was in the process of purchasing from a small dealership in Keene. He was having issues with the owner and felt as though he needed to teach him a lesson. Not really wanting to participate, I agreed anyway. After all, I didn't want them to think I was growing into being a punk or a sellout. My reputation was at stake. The goal was to beat the owner and take his money because he always carried a wad of cash on him at the end of the day. This attempt failed as we didn't arrive in time to accomplish this. Thank God for that. We left, but my foster brother wasn't satisfied. His animosity towards the dealership owner was great. He had this idea that there was a ton of money put away in his office, so we needed to break into the building. We went back, but something weird happened. I heard a voice in the distance saying, don't do it. But then when I quickly looked back, there was no one there. After that, an unsettling feeling came over me. We entered the building through an open window and took TVs, auto parts, money, and etc. After searching for a week, the police arrested Fred first, then me, and then the other guy. So here I am in jail facing a large amount of time behind bars. The advice that my dad gave me while I was in there, my biological father, he said that if you're going to do something, you should do it by yourself. He promised to get a lawyer to get me out, but after the first month of my extended stay, he was non-existent. I later found out that he used all the money he got from disability back pay on girls, drugs, and randomness. The grand jury indicted us and charged us with burglary of a building and engaging in organized criminal activity. And so now I'm sitting here facing a max of 10 years in prison. Distraught with no money and stuck with a court-appointed attorney who was drunk half the time, I started the process of getting settled into the max security side of the jail. This will be the first time I picked up a Bible since my teenage years. There were always people who came in to minister to us in the jail, and I had nothing else to do, so why not listen to what they had to say? Either way, God is not opposed to using our darkest hours as a way to turn our eyes to Him. I went through the motions thinking that God was there to serve me. I prayed and often got mad when He didn't answer my prayers as though He was on my time. Months later, the courts gave me time served for the state jail felony, but put me on 10 years probation for the 3rd-degree felony. After 11 months behind bars, I was finally released. The problem is that I didn't know what to do. My girlfriend left me because finding a job was the most difficult thing and I couldn't support myself. Over the years, I engaged in more criminal activity, from robbing people to selling drugs and even stealing from my own family members. I literally did it all and landed right back in jail. You can guess that the judge was not too happy to see me again. With thousands of dollars behind on both court and probation fees, coupled with other arrests, they wanted to send me to prison instead of reinstating me. Once again, I turned to the Bible for comfort. This time around was different in the sense that I started to understand it more, but I was still using it for my own personal gain. Paperwork at the courts got mixed up, so they reinstated my probation. But I spent 6 additional months there before being transferred to another jail where I had pending charges to settle. Upon being released, my mind was blank. In a sense, I kind of wanted to go back because I was comfortable there. I didn't want to come out and face the world again. A lot of things can change in the span of 9 months, but God blessed me with the job selling water purification systems a couple weeks after I got out. The owner was a convicted felon, so he understood the struggle of finding employment. A year later, I was heavily into sexual addiction with having several women in and out of my sister's house. At the time, the owner of the water purification company called me back to come back and work because they were having issues with closing cells. And the day I went back, I met my now wife. She was working there. She was going through a difficult divorce and I was facing challenges as well. We talked and spent time together and later found out that we probably met sometime when we were young. My stepfather trained her dad at Cisco and her mom used to babysit my youngest brother. She was the first one to not care about my background or where I came from. She conceived pretty quickly and we had our first daughter together 9 months later. We'd argue quite often about the porn addiction and such because I never saw it as a big deal. After all, my stepfather watched it as though it was a Grey's Anatomy TV series, so I thought nothing of it. In 2012, we were engaged to be married, and as a condition of where we were getting married, we had to be celibate for the months leading up to our wedding date. I agreed to this condition because she was excited for it, knowing deep down inside that I was not prepared for this. And over the months, I grew bitter. We'd been sexually active a good portion of our relationship, and to stop abruptly was just ludicrous in my mind. I toyed with little hints of needing intimacy, but she held her position strong. Our conversations at home were parted by the TV and other means of technology. I developed an illusion that she didn't want anything to do with me, that she didn't want to hear my heart, and at that time I was being very selfish. Temptation arose as I engaged in seemingly meaningful conversations with another woman at my job. We talked and texted after work until we finally kissed. My wife found out and didn't want anything to do with me, but after a few days, she took me back in. But I just couldn't stop there, though. We met again, but this time we took it way further than it needed to go. Again, she found out, and I thought we were done. I felt she would never forgive or be able to love me the way she did before. This is when I knew that a change needed to happen, but that's how we are, right? We wait until it's possibly too late before we choose to be better. But I began to understand the true strength that lies within a woman through this beautiful person that God gave me. I got on my knees and made my plea to God night in and night out. This is when we started to attend Shoreline Church. When I found out that they did baptisms on every first Wednesday of the month, I signed up and got baptized. This will be the first time I truly made a decision that enough was enough. To see the hurt on her face, to look at my kids and know that I betrayed them as well, was enough for me. After taking a premarital class, we got married in March of 2013. It would be great to say that things were all of a sudden perfect, but there was a process that had to take place. Arguments still occurred, threats were made, and there were even some times where I just wanted to give up because I felt it was a lost cause. But God provided us with the strength. I know that a lot of people who come through CR go through the same obstacles we've been through as a couple, but we, along with many others, are living proof that it doesn't have to stop at the point where the problem started. God can and will mend things together should you allow him to do so, but he can only work with what we give him. Things are not perfect and they never will be, but we are light years beyond where we were before. Principle 5 says, voluntarily submit to every change God wants to make in my life and humbly ask him to remove my character defects. Happy are those whose greatest desire is to do what God requires. Matthew 5:6. This principle has been had the most impact on my journey because it's the one that I've had the most trouble with. Let's face it, instead of submitting to the change God wants to make in our lives, we much rather prolong the process by quote unquote doing it all ourselves. But I found that God can move things along a lot faster than we ever could. And true growth comes from having the willingness to be vulnerable. If you're not willing to embrace change, then you will continue to remain the same. You must get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And in the words of George Bernard Shaw, progress is not possible without change. And those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. And the truth is that we all have scars that are deeply ingrained within the pit of our souls. And we get in the habit of constantly massaging and picking the scabs instead of allowing them to heal. And we all have a choice on whether or not we want to continue to pass on what was passed on to us or cut that string and link it with the one God is holding out to us and begin a new legacy. We're all here today because there is a task that God has for each and every one of us. You're here, if you're a newcomer, or even have been here for a while at CR, because God is ready to move you beyond your past, beyond yourself, beyond the criticism, beyond the letdowns, beyond the infidelity, beyond the hurt, the pain, the addiction. And I say thee because it separates you from the action. None of these things belong to you, so don't associate the choices that you've made with who you are as a person. You are more than whatever your perception of self leads you to believe. And don't continue to do life alone. Without Pastor Cheryl, Stacy Jinkerson, the Mikes, Prince, my wife, and others within this big family pushing me towards growth, I would not be up here today. I've graduated from and have led several step studies became the creative director for another church family, and my wife and I are now ministry leaders. My honor for God, my wife, my kids, and others around me are at an all-time high, and they continue to grow with each passing day. Most importantly, I now love myself, which was very hard to say before. And for you newcomers, we welcome you into this family. We love and accept you for who you are. Be a part of this journey towards changing lives around the world, because the church needs you, the community needs you, and your family needs you as well. And I just want to end with this quote from Carl Sagan. It says that who are we if not measured by the impact on others? Because that's exactly who we are. We are the sum of the influence and impact that we have in our lives and on the lives of others, whether positive or negative. So I want to encourage everyone to be better so that we can help others do the same. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you for sharing, Robert. We all have a story or many stories, and I don't know about you, but I was impacted by hearing a story. And so I would encourage you, if you have something to share, whether it be simple 2 minutes or whether it be 20 minutes like Robert shared, please let me know. If you're not sure how to share your story, that's what your CR leaders are for. Myself, Dennis, Carol, Melissa, any of us that you want to reach out to, we can help you in walking through your own story and help you shape how to best share your story so that you can impact others. I know every time I hear somebody like Robert share their story, I'm impacted by it. And at times I take more away from that than I do from lessons. And you may be the same. You may take away more from a testimony than you do from hearing me share a lesson each week. So when he closed tonight and wrapped things up, he referenced a quote, and I want to reiterate that to you. He quoted Carl Reagan when he said, "Who are we if not measured by our impact on others?" And so I want to use that tonight as our call to action. As we close things tonight, I will challenge you to consider how you're impacting the lives of others around you. Consider just by your actions, by the way you engage with one another, how you engage with the community, your coworkers, your family. How are you impacting others? And then I want you, while you're considering that, to think about how could you share a bit of your story and impact others? Maybe it's by bringing them a voice of hope and encouragement, by looking and saying, this is what I've made it through. This is where I once was and I am here now. Or this is what I am struggling to go through today. How can you bring a voice of encouragement to others? How can we learn from one another? So thank you for letting me share. Thank you for listening to the story tonight. I will wish you well. Go with God, go in peace, and consider how you can positively impact others around you. Amen.